Welcome to On Strategy Showcase. I'm Fergus O'Carroll in Chicago. Today, we are going to be focusing on a great case that came out of the US Effies this past year. It's a Favor Delivery, and their agency is Preacher out of Austin, Texas. Now, I love this case, and if you're into Effie cases as much as I am, you can go to our website, and under the Effies tab on the homepage, there's about 150, if I'm not mistaken, about 150 episodes that are on there that are Effie winners. So you can browse through all of those episodes and play them as you wish. We've also just launched last month our YouTube channel, and we have episodes posting there every week, new episodes. So you can go there and not only now listen to the show, but you can watch the show. I'm not sure if that's an advantage or not, but you can be the judge of that. One of the things that I wanted to do today, because I'm super curious about it, is I have never been in a judge's room. So I was very curious to understand what happens in the judge's room during Effie's. And so I've invited Emily Portnoy. She is Chief Strategy Officer for BBDO New York to join us. She was a final rounds judge in the David and Goliath category this year. And it was a gold Effie that Favor and Preacher won out of that judge's room. So I wanted to actually ask Emily to come in and share a little bit about her impressions of the Favor case study, but also, and for me personally, more importantly, what happens inside the judge's room. So before we hear about the case, let's have a conversation with Emily. So I've always been fascinated by the judging process, and we see photographs of the judging process. So I'm like really interested, literally, in how it happens. I see pictures of 10 people in a room, Emily, and they're all looking at their computers.
Mhm.
Something's happening. So tell us a little bit about what's actually going on in that room, and how does it how what's the flow like?
Well, I could probably talk about the FA judging process for a long, long time. I'm actually quite passionate about it in the most nerdy of ways. But really, judging for the FEs, particularly final round, it is not for the faint of heart. You definitely need a lot of snacks and you need a lot of energy. It's a pretty much, you have to commit to a half day or a full day, first and foremost. When you go into the room, it really is complete and total focus. One of the things I love most about the FEs is that I do believe it is one of the most objective judging processes out there. Every detail in terms of how it's orchestrated is really meant to truly, really reward effectiveness. So, the last day, the final round judges, you probably have anywhere from 6 to 10 folks in a room, all very, very senior clients and marketers and strategists. They actually spend a lot of time orchestrating the judges to make sure that there won't be any conflicts of interest in terms of judging the cases. So they try to make sure that your agency is not in the cases that you'll see or a client, but I really hold a lot of respect for them because it's a pretty strict process. And really, what we do is each room has a set of categories that they go through during the day, and you may have 2 cases or 6 for each one. What we each have is we each have our computers, we each have a portal. It is anonymous and it is individualized, and it is quite intense in terms of the scoring process. So we sit there, we probably have a lot of snacks and some coffee, and we start to go through the cases. And so, we pretty much get about 15 minutes to read through the case, which, if you know Effie's, is quite exhaustive and comprehensive.
And would you
We
have
then,
would you
I'm
have
sorry.
read the case in advance of sitting
No.
in final?
No, actually, that's a really important point. You don't know what categories you're going to see, and you don't know what cases you're going to see. You
Interesting.
walk in completely blind to the process.
So it's not like you're a jury in a jury room who has heard the arguments. You don't know. You're in there because of your qualities and your experience with a mix of people. I didn't know that. That is fascinating.
I think that's something I wish more people did know because you can't lobby for an Effie. It is actually impossible to lobby for an Effie because of how individualized and objective the judging process is, not just in the final rounds, but even kind of round by round to get there. Because the way it works is you score based on the different components up to 100. And even that, even what we give in that room that day gets combined with all the other scores that the case received along the way, which we have no visibility into, and we never will know what it is, and it's computerized, and it's actual, and it's fair. So, no, you can never lobby for an Effie, actually, Fergus, it's not possible.
And so when you talk about you get 15, 20 minutes, whatever, to read the case, so that's what I'm seeing when I see photographs of people sitting around.
Yes.
They're studying in essence. They're
Yep.
reading through the case. Maybe they're able
Mhm.
to watch the case video. And then is there conversation? Is there, without getting into details, is there conversation and debate?
There is a lot of conversation and debate because that's also part of the Effies. I'm glad you asked. So, what I think is really unique is that the Effies does not require consensus. So, there is a lot of debate, and people prod each other on the various cases. And maybe we try to see different perspectives. Maybe there's a client that might look at this differently than a way an agency person. But ultimately, you get to give your score, and nobody ever sees your score. So, yes, we do debate. But if you and I are debating something, you still may decide to not agree with me, and that is totally fine, and that is your right, and that's usually what happens. So no judges know what the other judges actually gave.
I love that. So even when you leave after final judges round, you don't know you don't know which case has won what, or if
No, I mean,
anything, right?
no, I mean, I think sometimes you can have a gut. Sometimes
Yeah.
there will be certain cases that are pretty unanimous in terms of the wow factor and how well the case was written, how clear the case study was, and the video itself really bringing that to life. But I think that's why winning an Effie, particularly a gold, is so rare or meaningful because you have sort of all these folks that are super obsessed with effectiveness and pretty judgy people. We're pretty judgy. And we don't have to come to a consensus. So it's pretty hard to win a gold Effie because of that.
So this particular case that we're talking about today, favor delivery out of
Yep.
Texas, Preacher was the agency. What was it that first struck you about the case?
So I personally believe that the best strategies are so sharp and so simple that they're retroactively obvious. In fact, that's a
Yes.
term that I use a lot here at BBDO, and I try to hold my strategies to that with my team. And when we read the whole notion, when I read the notion of how Texas orders in, it was so simple that on sort of three levels, and I actually remember this without even reading the case. Like the first thing that impressed me, and I think with David and Goliath in particular, it's really hard because there's always a lot of scrutiny on, okay, well, how much are you really a David? And is that really a Goliath? It was very, very clear in the business case that they were an icon that had lost ground and they were losing to the big guys. And they realized they weren't going to be able to compete. So, like, first and foremost, super, super clear on the business reason for why they had to do something radically different. Then they found this amazing insight, which is like turn our limitation into a superpower. Everybody loves those kind of strategies when they can work. And this time it really, really worked because it was all about making, Texas pride. With every click, you're actually becoming more Texan. And I think we saw that play out with, okay, they had a cool insight. We're going to lean into Texas pride, but they didn't stop there. They didn't just say we're going to do this more broadly. They actually went to the target, and maybe we won't be able to share this, but they went to that target of really the new Texans or the transplants. And
Yes.
to,
Yes.
to me, what I remember standing out, and this is how I remember it, was, with every click, you're not asking someone to choose a delivery service over another, but actually with every click, you are flexing your own Texas pride and you're sort of becoming more Texas every time you interact with favor. And in a nutshell, months later, I still remember that case in those three sentences, and that to me is one of the reasons why it really stood out.
9 million people moved to Texas since 2000. It's been a huge thing in the US. And it recognized that when people move into a new market, particularly one with the level of pride that Texas has, people naturally want to find their way. They're open to trying new things, having new
Mhm.
experiences. And that's what I loved about it because they could have just been were about Texas, but it was that extra layer, right, of the newcomers as a
Mhm.
device creatively that really took it to the top for me.
Absolutely. I think for these newcomers, with every every time they interact with this brand and this app, they're not just feeding a hunger for tacos, but they're actually feeding this hunger for belonging. Because at the end of the day, when you move to a new place, you want to find your community, you want to belong, you want to start to understand what that culture is. And it was so clear that when you come into Texas, and Texas has such a, you don't mess with Texas, they've got this big, big culture, to actually give people a window and an ability to feel that they had a shortcut to that level of belonging was really powerful and very, very smart. And it was done in a really witty, provocative manner, creatively. They just made us all smile in the judges' room.
Why do you think it was worthy of a gold?
So I think a lot of times we talk about, challenger brands, and sometimes it's a Herculean feat to try to beat a bigger guy at their own game. And it was very, very clear, and they put this aside in the beginning. They were never going to win on more features. They were never going to win on more budget. They were never going to win on more noise or more deals. And so they just boldly said, "We are never going to win at this game. So we have to write radically different rules that only we can play by, and therefore only we can win." Which again, retroactively is sort of the challenger brand playbook, but they doubled down on, what made them different. I think what really stood out was that line, proudly unavailable in 49 states. They just brought this attitude to doubling down on the fact that they were not the big guys, that they were local, and they made this badge of honor. And, similar to what you said, it was the audience piece that was so smart that it put it over the edge because it could have just been about generic Texas pride or spirit. I don't think it would have landed. That idea that they made a welcome mat, and they also made it an inside joke at the same time
Yeah.
is one way to think about it. And I think it was that combination and that duality that really put it over the edge because they carried that reframe throughout everything. You could see it threaded through to the work, to why they did what they did, and all of a sudden, it was very clear they were no longer just background noise and this icon that had faded into the background, but it was actually kind of put on a pedestal, and Texans wanted to put it on a pedestal because it was able to awaken something just because of how, clever and real they were in the Texas isms, for lack of a better word, that were really able to create that lightning rod and that rallying cry and ultimately leapfrog past competition. The stats were through the roof. I know we can't go into details, but they were pretty impressive.
It's Emily Portnoy, Chief Strategy Officer for BBDO in New York. Thanks so much for being a part of this. Great
All
to see
right,
you again.
thanks.
And so here's my conversation with Seher Sikandar. She's Associate Strategy Director at Preacher in New York, and Chris Rogge is Senior Director, Branding Creative for Favor. Enjoy. For those who don't know Favor, Chris, tell us about Favor. A little bit of background on the brand and its history. Just maybe just a minute or so.
So Favor, we're an on-demand delivery company here in Texas. We started back in 2013. In 2015, we actually started to expand outside of Austin. Austin is where we got our start. We started to expand outside of Austin. In 2015 to 2017, we were even outside of Texas. Fun fact, we were outside of the US and our logo was Favor with a U in it.
Interesting.
Yes, it was. Another fun fact, one of my first projects as I started was to send a bunch of flyers to print for North Carolina, and I used the wrong logo. I used the Favor logo, and our co-founders had a whole big joke about it.
And so which country were you were in Europe with that sort of a spelling, I'm assuming, or no?
So we were just in Canada. It was
In Canada.
the
So
Canadian.
they use the U in favor, do they?
They
Like
did. They
behavior
did.
is the IOUR, whatever it is.
It is, yeah. So it's super fun. We have a whole email address that you can still access us at favordelivery.com.
So
But
you were
anyways,
outside of Texas? Did you just say that? Was that the Canada you're referring to,
we
right?
were, yeah, we were outside of Texas. Yeah. So we were in, I forgot exactly how many markets, but yeah, we were everywhere from Tempe, Arizona, to, North Carolina, Philadelphia, Boston, etc.
Right. And then you've pulled in since then to be
We
Texas
have.
only.
We have, yeah. So in 2017, we're just looking around. We're looking at the competitive landscape. We're seeing in what markets we felt that we had the right to win in, and what markets we felt we were already, had a leg up. And it was Texas, right? You have some of those markets like Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, especially, which actually we were never in, that just had delivery. They had a high density, they had competitors in there that already kind of established strongholds in those markets. So in 2017, we said, hey, let's pull back to just being in Texas. We're seeing a lot of great success here. We got our start here.
That must have been a difficult decision because some might see that as we're not growing enough, we're not able to expand, so we have to pull it in. I mean, I gotta think that culturally, you guys had to sort of pump yourselves up because you were now concentrating versus expanding geographically?
It's funny because I think sometimes people see limiting and pulling back as a limitation, and we actually saw it as a superpower, and we'll go into it a little bit here in a second with Texas in general. But I think sometimes you have to just understand what you're good at and where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and we realize that, hey, if there's a market that we don't feel we have the right to win in, competition already has a stronghold, they're already winning market share. It's kind of fool's errand for us to be in there. Why be in there, right? Whereas Texas, we felt like we had the right to win here. And it kind of goes back to our Texas strategy overall, and kind of a good tee up in a little bit for the strategy of this campaign is we see being in Texas as our superpower, right? We live here, we're from here, we're all Texans. We know Texas better than anyone, and so we just felt we had a real opportunity to pull back to just being in Texas. And yeah,
So, Sahara, when you look at favor in the past, how would you describe the way it used to message itself?
I would say it was what Favor Neighbor, I think, was kind of one of the early sentiments around the brand. And I think it was just seen as like a very charming, local, neighborly brand. I think that one thing that we found in the messaging audit was that Favor in, trying to find its footing was trying out lots of different kinds of messaging, from content to tonally to whether or not and how much to include their parent company HEB. So there was a lot of experimenting going on, which didn't necessarily bode as well for kind of like a clear picture in the customer's mind about who Favor was and even what they did, because there was a time, and Chris, maybe you talk about this more if it makes sense, but like there was a time where they were also experimenting with the product offering of anything delivered. So because of that, there was quite a bit of messaging all the way from food focused to more general convenience focused messaging for
So,
it.
what is HEB for those outside of Texas? I've never heard of it.
which is crazy. As I was thinking about this podcast, I was like, I'm going to have to describe HEB. And for those in Texas, it feels, almost sacrilegious to have to describe HEB to somebody. So HEB is a grocer here in Texas. They're even outside in Mexico as well. They are the number one rated grocer according to Dun Humby. They are just a staple of the Texas landscape, of the ecosystem here, of the culture. When you move to
And you
Texas,
guys are owned by
and
HEB?
we are owned by HEB, yeah. So in
Okay, got it.
2017, or actually 2018, so we pulled back to Texas in 2017. Really focused on making sure we were providing service well to those Texas markets. And then in 2018, we got acquired by HEB.
And was that part, were you still in the maybe we'll deliver groceries business, and therefore that's why you were of interest to HEB?
Yeah, so there's kind of three big reasons that we joined forces with HEB. The first one is, yeah, groceries, right? So they need to get into grocery delivery. They've been in it for a while. This was around the time Amazon and Whole Foods were joining forces as well, and they just realized, hey, we've got to provide our customers with a delivery option as well. Favor has that ability to do that last mile delivery. Makes sense to just join forces with them rather than us trying to build something on their own. HEB is great at, really thinking ahead, right? And thinking about what their customers need 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. So made sense from their end. From our end, it's HEB. It's literally the best company
Right.
here in Texas. No brainer.
And
And
you guys overtly co-brand with HEB, as we'll see when everybody hears the work later. So, Sahara, so this is a challenger brand. This is up against Uber and DoorDash. You guys, in terms of our favor in terms of market share, is closest to Grubhub in Texas. You've just
Mhm.
surpassed Grubhub as the data shows. Tell
Yeah.
us about how this starts with Preacher. What's the initial conversation? What's the business problem you're asked to solve?
Favor was, this neighbor favor, hospitality, centric brand that really came through in the pandemic for local Texans. It was deeply beloved. Then gets bought out by HEB, who has, an even grander history of these kind of things, of kind of community investment. And as the bigger players came into the space, naturally they have so many more resources, as being these kind of tech behemoths. And with that, naturally when the landscape changes, maybe your original strategies don't work the same way that they used to, right? And so Favor was really they were there was a challenge to maintain the ground that they had gained.
So what's the problem you have that leads to this campaign? Because you also have an internal agency, right? So, why reach out to Preacher? What was the ask?
So we realized that, by investing in COVID and those product lines, by investing in our service as well after COVID hit, we just wanted to make sure we had a lot more customers at the time, want to make sure our service levels were right. We realized we hadn't invested in marketing in a while. And to Seher's point, kind of haven't looked at our messaging in a while. Anything delivered was still kind of lingering in the background. We had a bunch of kind of just promotional offers that kept making their way into our kind of mass awareness messaging. And we realized that we need a strategic partner that can come in here and just help set us on the right path. Again, you said it. We have an amazing internal agency in house. Team's amazing, very talented. But I'm very big on the belief of kind of 1+1 = 11. Right? We've got a team. If we can get that one of Preacher, we're really going to help
But do you
transform.
think, at the time, from a business perspective, where was this an initiative? And you can't answer. It's both, by the way.
Mm.
Was this about growth, or were you defending against share loss?
Um, that is a really good question. I would say it was about growth, because we started to see some of the COVID customers then move back into their old COVID habits, meaning, hey, now I want to go out to eat more, right? And so what we said is, hey, we need to get back on the growth train again. We need to get our name back out there.
So, from a Preacher perspective, what happened in those early days, Sarah? Was there anything you've been able to sort of, think through in terms of what were some of the key learnings from research that was done at that time or planning that was done at that time that set up this sort of strategic pathway that you guys ultimately went down?
The conversation often returned to this thing about a record amount of newcomers coming to Texas and wanting to be mindful of whatever strategic route we went down, whatever creative campaign route we went down, that we didn't alienate the new folks or the old folks. And if there was a way to talk to them both at once, even better. And so that was something that obviously came out in the work that you saw. And then, to be honest, yes, there were things that came out of desk research and other places that were crystallizing, but it was like, this is actually my favorite thing about the strategy is it was intuition, and I brought up the Texas part, right? I brought up the pitch process because it's actually relevant to the arc of um, this strategy journey, on my part at least, with my counterpart. So my counterpart Eugene was on the pitch process, and we came up with three strategic territories. In a nutshell, one was called small, so just about being a smaller business, and really in that sense being kin or kindred with other smaller and local businesses. Another one was about HEB. Naturally, to what degree should we be telegraphing off of the brand equity of this beloved, iconic brand? And then thirdly was Texas in some form or fashion, leaning into the brand equity of Texas, right? And I was looking back at, our kickoff deck, and we had summarized Favor's feedback to these three territories. And this was, something that my counterpart Eugene was downloading me on when I first got brought onto the project. And for small, it was like, don't want to really lean into that. But, we do like the sentiment of being human centered, and that harkens back to our hospitality ethos. Texas, there's something there, but the mood was like, that's not the thing. Something, maybe sprinkle a little Texas on it, would be cool, right?
Yeah.
And then it was like HEB is where the heat is, because naturally it's the icon, right? That was the feedback we got. And then on top of that, come back with some differentiated territories that feel truly distinct. And I got this download from Eugene, and I was like, okay, we're definitely going to try to see if we can find some differentiated new territories in our first formal strategy round one. But I think it's Texas. I know they might not be feeling it. They might be side eyeing us, but it's Texas.
For you, Chris, I mean, were you in that room when those first initial scenarios were teed up of small HEB in Texas?
I was,
Tell
and it's
tell us
the
about the reaction from your side.
It's the debate we have every single day, right? Of those are the three pillars, right? They're still part of our brand. And I think it's something we discuss, of how you play on each of those. And just HEB as an example, anyone out there whose brand is part of a larger company knows it's hard to find that balance, right? Of leaning on the larger brand's equity and trust. Again, Seher said it better than I will. They're awesome. They're amazing. They're number one in Texas, number one even in the country. So it's easy for us just to say, hey, we're part of that company, right? But then do customers understand, okay, that's awesome. Why should I care? Who exactly are you? And so I think that was the strategic lens with HEB that we weren't able to crack. So that's why we were so keen, as Preacher preached it, to say, hey, bring us something back there. I think, with the small, it's something we all talked about. It's what I alluded to earlier, right? We view it as a superpower. We view, not being national, being able to focus on Texas as a superpower. But we didn't know really what, a couple of we couldn't really see where that was going. And Texas is something that we just felt like it's right. It's local. It's a little bit of that small, but we didn't really know the way in there. And so that's
Mhm.
kind of the feedback we gave him is like, well, yeah, HEB is the home run. That's the one we always feel like. And we're like, yeah, Texas feels like it's it. But we were struggling to kind of see how that was really going to come to life.
With that layer of new Texans
Yeah.
coming in, when did that when did that bubble up? Because I get because you could have gone strategically just with War for Texans,
Mhm.
and without having the target audience or extended target audience of the new Texans,
Mhm.
it could still have been really strong, but in my opinion, the new Texans took it to a whole new level.
Mhm.
When did you decide that you needed to use new Texans? And do you think of them, and this would be a question to both of you, do you guys think of them as a device
Mhm.
or as a target audience?
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean by that?
For sure. I think it's a little bit of both. And honestly, even the way that the new Texans became, in a sense, our heroes or device or sort of audience, all at the same time is because, like I said, ever since the pitch process, they were a constant pulse throughout our conversations. Don't alienate them. There's something relevant here about, record waves of um transplants coming to Texas. There's something here, there's something here. Don't alienate them. Should we be talking about it? And so I think they were always there with us. There was maybe a little bit of like a spirit animal. I don't know how to put it, but they were there for us. And I think that yeah, it was there every step of the way, and I think it really coalesced, speaking of the device part, when we landed on, the one execution amongst many that was the newcomer-focused execution, and yes, on one end, that they were used as a device in the execution, but they were also used as almost like a I don't know what, like, the good version of, like, a dog whistle is, but they were used as a target audience, as a conduit to, like, wink at,
Yeah. It was a wink in
potential
both directions.
Yeah.
exactly, right? And so by talking with, specificity to this hyper targeted audience, but in a way that felt universal, we were speaking to our base target as well.
So how does it come around for you, Chris? How do you get from Texas to looking at these new Texans? Was there rounds of creative work where you went back and forth and figured out, well, because I think Sahara was sort of suggesting that maybe there was one of many executions, and one of them was leveraging new Texans. If I picked that up right or wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we did another round of strat where we are like, what does Texas mean for y'all? And they started to illustrate it a bit more, right? It's the mix of the culture, and whatnot. And I think that gave us confidence that this was the right direction. That we said, okay, this feels like it come to life, right? And then the first round of creative pitching, we were like, I don't know if this is it. And then we're starting to evaluate, is it Texas? Because
Why
there's a lot.
why why were you doubting it?
We
Was
were
it
doubting it.
executions you were saying?
Yeah, a little bit of execution because we hadn't gotten that insight in that we felt like was unique, right? There were a couple executions that were around things like we're from here, so we kind of run the state. We deserve to, be here. And we're like, "Ah, it doesn't feel it. I think
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
Texans have a sense of pride, which is amazing. But sometimes when you lean on just that pride, it's kind of like, well, why do you have it? So
There's
what?
there's a thousand cliches about Texas
Exactly.
culture, right?
And so when the new Texans came in, I remember at first kind of getting worried because I was like, "Oh, are we limiting ourselves with talking to new Texans?" Because we talked about it at a high level, right? Like what we're exactly saying is what do you think about new Texans? And I was like, oh, is that going to limit us because we don't want to alienate, our current customers and Texans? And then we brought this device back of like, hey, what if we spoke to new Texans, but did it in a way that felt so connected to actual Texans that even, or an actual Texan, an old Texan, just looked at it and was like, that's me. They're talking to me, right? And to me, that
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
home run because you're talking to everyone in the state, and you're doing it in a way that isn't braggadocious. And this is actually a note that I was thinking through as I was reminiscing on the work is the first round, I would say, felt like we were talking to ourselves. And I think that's a mistake brands can often get into. We as marketers, we as branders and creatives, we develop these campaigns that we're like, that's awesome because we really care about it, but it doesn't connect with your customer. Your customer's like, okay, great. Tell me you run the state and tell me you're really cool. Okay, why should I still use you? But what I think when you can get this strategic insight and weigh in, that transcends culture, that's what connects with your customers. And that's what this campaign felt like. It was these moments where any new Texan or old Texan would say, wow, yeah, they feel like they get me. I feel seen in this ad. I feel represented.
So is Sahara from internally creatively, how easy was it to get to these executions? I mean, you guys are you're not from Texas yourself, right? But there are many who understood it. Was it tough to narrow it down to these three executions?
It was definitely a labor of love. There it's just like a razor's edge, you know, trying to find that balance between, we were really keen on finding true to Texas, insights for, the angles of each of these spots, and it's so easy to fall into tropes, and we didn't wanna do that. And we didn't wanna be so, like, kinda deep cuts that no one got it, right? So it's like finding the universality, but not tropey, but, able to be funny, but easy enough to, like, translate into, like, a 15 and a 30, like, that was, like it was quite a bit of puzzling we did to land on the right stories for each one, I would say.
So the first part we're going to see is this guy. He's a newcomer to Texas. He stands in his front yard, and his neighbors notice that he's about to do some yard work. And then, because they're so extraordinarily neighborly, they insist on being of help. So that's what you're going to be hearing for those people who are hearing but not seeing this. The second spot, I believe, is I'm not sure if is she a newcomer to Texas, the mother, or is she a Texan? She's a newcomer, right? Standing in the front yard where there's all of these signs. How would you guys explain that one?
The observer is the newcomer, and the person whose home it is and daughter is the native Texan, and she's explaining the yard sign culture to the person passing
I
by.
love it.
Since moving to Texas, I've learned that Texans love ordering food with Favor, the restaurant delivery app that's part of HEB. Thanks, Chris. And that if you're doing something in the yard, your neighbors will always offer to help.
Hey, need a hand?
I'll bring my tools.
Yeah, I could probably just take care of it myself.
Here. Use mine.
Favor, how Texas orders in.
Since moving to Texas, I've learned that Texans love ordering food with Favor, the restaurant delivery app that's part of HEB. And that front yards are for celebrating your kids' accomplishments.
Wow, that's a lot of signs.
Yep. We have a lot of pride. Jenny, lunch is here.
She's ferocious.
Well, thank you.
Favor, how Texas orders in. Download now to get $0 delivery fees your first 4 weeks.
This is great. So Chris, let's talk about how this all rolls out by channel. You guys did a lot of it internally, or was all of it sort of rolled out to Preacher?
Yeah, a lot of it was through Preacher, but one of the things that I love about our relationship is we're super collaborative, and so one of the big asks was film. We needed some TV spots. That's something we don't have the capabilities to do in house. So that was the first big bullet point on the brief. We need these beautiful 30-second spots that we were going to run on through some big linear TV buys and streaming TV buys, but we were keen to Seher's point of not only getting a refresh for the brand and a look and feel that helped reduce ourselves after not marketing heavily for 3+ years, um, but to go live on all our other channels, right? A lot of our customers live in the digital space, right? So we were super heavy with a lot of digital ads, and we loved doing those in tandem with Preacher because a lot of those were developed as part or cut downs of the TV spots, and some were developed as other insights, right? We had whole insights that we made and developed uniquely for social, right? So we're leading to the same device of speaking to newcomers, but just were even more of these little cultural nuggets that we dropped on social, both paid and organic. We had a big earned approach as well that we kind of went out with this, how Texas orders in report of data and insights around how our customers were interacting with Texas foods to really lend that, hey, we're from Texas, we know it the best. And then we ingested the same campaign look and feel into our existing customer messaging. So life cycle and in an app and push. So it was just, we loved it because it was really 360 approach to where new customers who are becoming acquainted with our brand got to see this, but even our current customers there as that are coming into our ecosystem got to interact with this campaign and interact with this kind of reintroduction of favor as well.
So the campaign won 2 Effies this year for the US Effies. So Sahara, as we get ready to close out here, where does it go from here? Because it just seems that you could just do iterations of this, and it would still be incredibly funny, still be incredibly fresh. Is that the plan? Because as we all on this call know, brand isn't built overnight. You've got to do it over multiple years and consistently, and at least not consistently necessarily, but fresh ways.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, are you guys working on the next round, or where are you guys talking about taking it in the future?
Oh my goodness, we've already done a bunch of campaigns since the original How Texas Orders In campaign. We've probably done 3-ish,
Yeah.
we're on another one that's about to come out, and so all of them live, under the Texas banner, the kind of that being the heart of things in different ways. So the newcomer approach was very specific and timely to what was a big and new story back then. It's still something that's, happening now, but there's so much richness in Texas culture. And really, it's like, I think sometimes, and shout out to Favor for this too, when, you're trying to reposition a brand or reintroduce a brand, um, as strategists, we like to um, set the set the sights high in a way that is aspirational, not in a way of aspirational, this is out of reach and this is what you could become, but this is who you are in your DNA, as in for Favor, like an expert on Texas culture who cares about their community. Maybe they don't have every single dot connected and all the show and prove that they want for it, but we as outsiders were able to see this is who you are, and it's okay to take the time to, um fill that in, color in that picture. And so now the activity is to try on all these different ways where we get to be, these Texas experts, part of the community, building a community. And so it's exciting. We get to try on different expressions and really own what we the kind of the sandbox that we set out for ourselves with this first campaign.
Yeah, it's wonderful work, and everybody can see both the New Texans work and all the latest work on our website at onstrategyshowcase.com. Seher Sikandar, Associate Strategy Director for Preacher in Austin, Texas, and Chris Rogge is Senior Director, Brand and Creative for Favor Delivery. Thank you both for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we'll see everyone on the next episode.